You're listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 125. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hello everybody and welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you've joined me for this one today. How are you? How are things going? Are you following along? Are you making progress? Well, as for me, things are going very well here, and I'm actually really happy, really quite excited, because we're in the sort of the 3rd to 4th week of April, which of course means one thing, and one thing only. Yes, the World Snooker Championships. I know I've spoken about snooker on the podcast before. I am a bit of a snooker geek, and please, if you haven't watched any, take a peek. You're really missing a trick. Now, it's a sport, of course, first and foremost. But here's the fascinating thing that I notice the more that I watch it. The impact of how the players show up, how the players manage their minds, how the players back themselves, and how they learn to evaluate and take full ownership of their emotions and actions. Right, it's right there on our TV screens, and you could plot. I'm sure you could plot a graph where you're looking at. You could see what's going on for them and how they're feeling and their results that they're creating on the table. It's totally and utterly fascinating. All right, so enough about snooker. I might give you a little update next week to let you know what's going on there. But anyhow, what we're going to talk about today is accountability. Now, this is something that you're going to hear about a lot if you're kind of hanging around the field of alcohol reduction, and actually anything to do with goals or creating, a different life or different results that you want for yourself. Something I read and hear about a lot. In fact, there are lots and lots of posts. Lots of them. I could probably go onto Facebook or any of the platforms and find an example right now where people are saying that I'm posting this for accountability, or I'm posting this to keep me accountable, or I'm posting this so that you can hold me accountable. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's not just about what accountability is, but how to make it work for you. And for those of you who believe you've kind of sorta achieved the relationship with alcohol that you want, which is great, but perhaps you're not fully confident. Perhaps you think you need a little bit of extra support, a little bit of extra guidance. I'm launching a new offer that I'm going to talk about at the end of the podcast that I think is tailor-made for you. All right, so let's get on with the show. Now, my lovely regular listeners to this podcast, you know I like a definition. I'm a real words person. I can really get behind the meaning and beauty of words. In fact, I used to walk around with a list of words that I just thought sounded wonderful to say. So I'm going to start by talking about definitions here, what accountability actually means and what it isn't. So that's where we're going to start. So I did, of course, look up a definition, and I read 2 ways of thinking about it. The first was accountability is the state of being accountable, liable, or answerable. And also, it's the obligation to bear the consequences for failure to perform as expected. Now, this is so interesting. If that is how accountability is defined, it doesn't, to my sense, seem incredibly appealing, because it's all about dealing with negative consequences of poor performance. But I think, and I want to offer you today, that this is only part of the answer as to what accountability is, right? Because consequences are only ever part of the picture. And it's also totally fascinating, just by the by, that when we think of consequences, as in these definitions, we only ever really think about negative consequences, right? Where we've screwed up. Yeah, thought for another day, maybe. But let me talk about how I choose to think about accountability and why. To me, accountability is about ownership. It's not just about consequences, about ownership and indeed full ownership. Because I believe we are each accountable for everything we do and everything we create. Right? Rather than just accountable when it comes to the consequences of poor performance. It's all about, for me, I think it's all about radical responsibility. So willingness to own your actions and own your results and own the thoughts and feelings that you generate to create those results, irrespective and regardless of the circumstances. Which means that the foundation of accountability is choice. Now, the fact is that there really is nothing you have to do. Every single thing we do in life, everything is a choice. Even when things are required of you, you still have a choice. But there is a big difference, I think, when you approach something as something you're choosing to do versus something you're having to do. Right? This matters because when you view something as something you've got to do, this can feel really heavy. You may resent it, you may fight it, you may rebel against it, or perhaps you may do the bare minimum. Let me give you an example, a few examples. You don't have to pay your bills. You don't have to attend the meeting that your boss called. You don't have to eat healthily. You don't have to adhere to traffic rules. You don't have to drink less. Even if you have all the proof why you're drinking too much, why it isn't serving you, why it isn't something that you want to do, you really don't have to drink less. You don't have to do any of these things. But as with anything in life, there will be consequences. Right? And here's the consequences piece of accountability. There are consequences to not meeting with your boss. Right? Just I'm not bothering today, boss, not turning up. There are consequences to not obeying traffic rules. Obviously, but there we go, I'm going to say it. And there are consequences to not drinking less. And you might be rolling your eyes a little bit and saying, yeah, of course, but why, of course you're going to do those things. I mean, it just makes sense. Well, yes and no again, we do have the choice. It's just that sometimes we are very clear we do not want the consequences of not doing the thing. So for instance, we're going to obey the traffic rules by driving on the left or the right, wherever you are in your jurisdiction, because we don't want to drive head on into another car, right? So we don't want that consequence, so we accept the thing that we have to do. We choose to obey the rule. But again, there's no reason why we have to. Now, I give you these very obvious examples, the traffic example, because when you realize you ultimately have choice, this will create a very different scenario for you. Not just in terms of what you're doing, and not just in terms of the results you're creating, but in terms of how you are showing up in your life. And this is really important when we come to drinking, because I know so many people that when they tell themselves they have to do this, they have to learn to be able to drink less, they have to be able to just consume less. I mean, they really don't want to, but they have to. When we're feeling that way, we just want to run a mile and we want to rebel. Right? And then we go back to day one and that whole thing. So this is really, really important, this idea of understanding and choosing what we want for ourselves. How you view accountability and how far you choose to embrace it impacts everything you do in all areas of your life. Because when you're in full ownership and choice mode, you're going to tap into your resources. You're going to show up differently. You're going to show up with a different energy. It's going to feel far more empowering. When you think of accountability in terms of having choices and you owning your choices, just think about how that feels, right? Then everything changes. That's a very different energy to, well, I have to do this thing because such and such said so. We talk a lot about seeking accountability from other people and from outside of ourselves. But I want to offer that self-accountability is where it all starts. It starts in everything you touch in your life. It starts with how you show up at work, how you show up in your relationships, to how you show up in your ability to execute plans effectively, to whether you're going to follow through on a commitment to a drink plan or not. It's 100% an inside job. And when you understand that true accountability is about choice and taking ownership, everything does change. You're going to move from resistance to empowerment, from limits to possibilities. And that's how we move from being sort of not happy with our lot, but kind of trundling along, to actually really just getting the life that we want. At the end of the day, the only person you need to worry about is yourself, because you are the only person who can hold yourself accountable for everything in your life. When you are fully 100% accountable to yourself, you will know that you fully own the way you think and you fully own the way you feel, which translates into you fully owning the actions that you take and the results you achieve. True accountability is not something that is at all passive. It's quite the contrary. True accountability actively confronts what we are creating in our lives and the consequences of those choices. I find accountability extremely empowering because we need to be willing to really look at our situation and own our situation and our role in creating where we are right now. The results you have in your life today are the sum of all your actions that you've taken and everything you've put into that. Now, this can be a challenging position to take. A lot of people will say, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. And I accept that. I accept this is not the norm of how we talk about this, because we tend to seek accountability outside of ourselves. Hence those posts on message boards where we're posting and requesting, we're asking people to hold us accountable. We're effectively saying, please, make sure I do this thing I'm going to do. The idea being that the person who's asking that doesn't feel committed, they don't feel sure that they'll actually go ahead and do that thing if other people aren't, sitting there holding them accountable. Now, we all do this to some degree, and you may argue this makes sense because so many factors impact us and our lives and our drinking that we for sure do not own, and I will not dispute that. What I want to pay attention to and get you to pay your attention to, however, is how we talk about these things. We talk about these things as triggering us, right? Something outside of us causes us to feel or act in a certain way. For instance, if our spouse drinks and refuses to not, quote unquote, they're not going to support us by removing all the booze from the house. Or maybe if you think it's not fair and really triggering, that alcohol is so glamorized and normalized on TV and in the cinemas and pretty much everywhere that it makes it really impossible for you to do the thing that you're trying to do, which is your healthy choice. Or maybe you think that the supermarkets are to blame for the pile it high and sell it cheap philosophy when it comes to booze, right? They often put it right there, slap bang, as you enter the supermarket. Don't they know how difficult this is for people who struggle with their drinking, right? You might be thinking some of those things. It's easy to become a victim to outside circumstances, spending time and energy hoping and imagining what our lives would be like if things around us were different. Because then we could change, right? We'd be able to drink less on holiday if the hotels didn't offer happy hours and if the airports weren't crammed with duty-free bargain specials, right? It's very easy to move to that. And yes, it's true that we don't control everything in our lives. We don't control a lot of stuff. We for sure don't control other people, however disappointing that can feel at times. Now, we know this intellectually because how many times do you hear people say, look, I know I don't control how he speaks to me, but if he would only ... and we go off and say exactly what we would expect that person, how we'd expect them to act or say or think or do, which would then, support us and enable us to do the thing we want to do. So I want you to hear me on this. We can make all of those things, right? All of those external circumstances, the reason that we have the unwanted results in our lives, right? We can make our spouse the reason why we've just never been able to cut back. We can do that. It's a choice you have. But doing that, I want you to understand the consequence of doing that is just going to keep you stuck, and for sure it's not going to be moving you forward. Or we can adopt my preferred approach and my offer to you as a policy of radical responsibility, of full accountability and ownership, which means focusing only on the things you control, which are your thinking, your feelings, and your actions. And the best news, those are enough. Those are really enough if you're willing to own them, if you're willing to set full accountability for them. Those are enough to absolutely create the life that you want. But how? You might be wondering. Well, I want you to think about it like this. It's a skill. I actually believe that growing a strong sense of accountability and learning to show up and really fully own our lives is something you can learn. I want you to consider playing the piano, someone who plays the piano, right? Learning to play the piano, it is a skill. You can only play the piano well, let's say, maybe qualify that, if you learn how. And if we put in the practice. Now, you can teach yourself, but you still need to put in the practice. We literally cannot decide to be a pianist and then boom, right, we know how to do it. We cannot buy this. We cannot go out there and buy on a box on a shelf being a concert pianist. We can't do that. We can hire the best teachers, but we still have to put in the work. We still have to build the muscles. And I think that is just a fundamentally wonderful way of thinking about growing a skill. I want you to consider that when you are learning to drink differently, it's like learning to be a great pianist. Right now, you may be an expert drinker. I've talked about this a lot. I was an expert Chablis drinker. I was very proud of my credentials as well. And I had to go through the process of learning how to not be that person. Now, I like to give homework. I like to keep this super practical. So I'm going to give you a little bit of homework here. That's going to build your muscle of accountability. It's 5 steps. And you're going to need to repeat this, right? You cannot just do this one time and say it didn't work. I want you to just repeat this. I mean, part of the practice of becoming someone who's accountable to themselves. So I want you to start by taking stock as to where you are. We're going to understand where you are, your current state. So I want you to consider your drinking and consider all the reasons or excuses why you have the result you have. And I want you to write them out. I want you to write out pages of this if you can. Now, the reason we do this is that when we can show ourselves like 1,000 reasons why we have for sure created the result we currently have, while we are the ones who've created the result of drinking a bottle of wine most nights, that's going to show you that there really is no way that result was created outside of you. So that's why I want you to do this. I want you to write it all out. Second step, I want you to notice where you are giving away responsibility or where you are not accepting full accountability. And that will be in that list you've created where you're saying other people have done things that has then created you to do something. I want you to look at that. You might want to circle all of the sentences you've written that you own, where it's I did this, I do that, I didn't say no, or whatever it is. Because I want you to be able to, when you do this, I want you to stay with it for long enough. This is the third step, by the way, that it is impossible for this result to have been created any other way than by you. I want you to be able to get to that point. And you might want to fight me on this. Say, no, it's because of all these other people. And if that feels real to you, that's your choice. But that is not going to get you into taking action mode, right? We want to get to the point here where we are taking ownership and taking accountability. So for instance, you might have written, I went to a restaurant and they offered a free G&T. Now you might say that it was kind of, you'd have been all right if they hadn't have offered the free G&T. But I want you to see that the only person who created the result of accepting and drinking that gin was you. And that's where we want to get to. So we want to put all of the reasons out there. And then step 4, I want you to look at the result you want to create, right? Go forward into the future. Who do you need to be to show up? How would that future person show up in that bar where they give the free gin? What choices do you need to make? How would you view all of the things outside of your control? And then as a 5th step, I want you to then consider how accountable you would feel and how that would determine how you show up in the world. This is all about us really just getting real. You don't have to show the list to anybody. Maybe don't even have to enjoy doing this. But I think getting real with this is really where I am and this is why is very, very powerful. Because when you do this, when you own it, and when you see the choices, then you're able to make different choices, and that's how you build self-accountability. So accountability is fully an inside job. I mean, that really is where it starts at least. You need to be your own best and first cheerleader. Others cannot replace or supplant that, but they can add to it. There is nothing wrong with getting help from other people. Right? So you need to be your own cheerleader. You need to be the main cheerleader, the one who holds the troop together, but others can add to it. You can have other people alongside you cheering you on, supporting you and guiding you. And that's me. That's where I come in. And just to continue with the cheerleader analogy, not that I've ever done any cheerleading, I would be in that situation, the one who'd I be there, you'd be your main cheerleader, but I can teach you some great routines, right, that are crowd pleasers. I can help to get you to expert level quicker than if it were just you on your own trying to figure it out with a few YouTube videos or a few downloadable PDFs that tell you this is how to do it. Because undoubtedly many people say they find it easier to consider being accountable to someone else. And if we do that and practice that, so you would be accountable in that scenario to me, if that's how you were to see it, that's going to teach you the skill of how it feels to be accountable. And then I would teach you how to transfer that to yourself. And that is so powerful. Now, there are also many people out there, and this may be you, and this is where I'm getting to the offer. I spoke about having a new accountability offer. And you maybe kind of sort of have the relationship you wish with alcohol, albeit maybe you're feeling a bit shaky about it. Maybe you can barely believe that you've managed to go, 3 whole months not drinking very much. And you might be thinking you figured out how to get this relationship with alcohol that you want, but you're not entirely sure. It feels like you still have the training wheels on your bike. You want to take them off, but you're fairly sure that if you take them off, you are going to crash. So I'm speaking to you now, or maybe those of you who you don't have anyone in real life to talk to about this. And you do want to talk to someone, right? Maybe your spouse doesn't understand this, your struggle, and your friend certainly wouldn't understand. So maybe you want to talk to someone, to keep you moving forward. It's going to help you strengthen your resolve and teach you any new tools that come along to make it simpler, right? For you to live a full life without worrying around alcohol. Now, people for quite a while have been asking me for this idea of being here just mainly for accountability. And it's actually a role I've played for some clients now. So now I'm formalizing that into an Accountability with Anna coaching offering. And this is all about helping to build your confidence in yourself, that you have what it takes to go out in the world and not worry about alcohol and back yourself, right? This is building on what you have taught yourself, either privately or maybe you've come from another training package. Maybe you've learned some tools and you're using them and you're okay with urges, but you're not really 100% sure that you are going to be all right. And you just feel like you need a little bit of extra support. That's me. I'm now there. I can be with this new offering, helping you with situations that come up, helping you to build your confidence. You can find out more about that new offer in 90dayslater.co/accountability. So again, that's for you if you're getting into the groove, you think you're finding your way with alcohol, but you need a bit of support. If, on the other hand, you are confused, things aren't going as you want, you overdrink on the regular, you are frustrated, you just think, I just need to be able to fix this, but I don't know where to turn. That's my main bread and butter. I help you with that. I can help you to achieve freedom around alcohol, so that you can live your life without being the one who's wondering, when is it time to get a top up in my glass? To learn more about this, go to 90dayslater.co and click on the book a call button so that we will talk. You can find out all about it. I can find out all about where you are and build the plan to get you to where you want to be. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Do take a look at the snooker. It's so good. All right, I'll see you next week. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around and they don't miss out on life. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.